start the farewell bash to the Reverend Joan Montagnes. Woo! So come on into the sanctuary and claim your spot into the pews. This is the time where we are going to share some wonderful words about Joan and her service to our congregation. Although today we are saying goodbye, today is a day of celebration. Today we are celebrating the past 8 years of having an engaging minister. We are celebrating the long career of Rosemary Joan Selwyn Montagnes, the lichen biologist turned preacher, the scientist who squared off against polar bears in the wilds of northern Canada, and the minister who told us in her sermons about the healing power of love. Today, we are celebrating the ministry that Joan shared with us. Today, we celebrate the stories for all ages that have moved us to laughter. Today, we celebrate all the committee meetings. Maybe not. Today, we celebrate the blessing of leadership she brought with her to Buffalo when she packed her bags and moved into our community, becoming one with us. And it is a lot to celebrate. So today, we're going to hear from some of our best beloveds, a term that Joan particularly likes, who have come today to celebrate the service and career of Joan. We will have some musical selections from the talented Michael Harris. Woo! Spirit fingers there. And when we have said our words of affirmation, the celebration will still not be complete, because that's when we're going to go out there and have lunch. And I need to make sure that you give our lunch folks 15 minutes. So when it ends in here, you got 15 minutes to muddle and share stories and cry a little or whatever you have to do, but give them 15 minutes to be able to get lunch on the table. But first, let's rock it. Let's get started with Michael. Michael has been our bass soloist for the congregation ever since I can remember. He teaches classes, which everyone raves about, but sadly I've been unable to attend. And Michael is going to share with us some thoughts and music today. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. So I kind of represent the music department here, and you'll hear various other aspects of other parts of the church and their relations with Joan. But this is from the musical perspective. And I have to say, we've really enjoyed working with Joan because she really loves music. I don't know if you were here a couple weeks ago when in the middle of a sermon, she suddenly burst into an a cappella rendition of Anne Murray's hit, Snowbird. And I don't think most members of the clergy would have the guts to try something like that, much less pull it off with confidence. I could tell things would be different when she came on board 8 years ago. That first year, she planned an Easter service that she told us that the music was going to consist of songs from the musical The Secret Garden, based on the classic children's novel. And that's one of my favorite shows, so I was really stoked for that. And I thought, this is not going to be your garden variety Easter service. Well, Joan's not your garden variety minister either. More than any other religious leader that I've worked with, she's taken a very active role in shaping the way music is used in worship. And if you've enjoyed the service music here over the last 8 years, she has been a big reason why that is so. Every month, we've met to plan the music for each following month's services, and she has been there to offer her ideas and feedback, all with the goal of making sure that the music always supported the message of the morning. So for us in the music department, it's been a great run. It's a system that's worked pretty darn well, except when it doesn't. And here's where I have to make a confession about one of my least proud episodes as a performer here, a case in which this well-oiled system kind of broke down. So fairly early on in her tenure, she had a sermon she was planning called, "Could It Be You?" And I think the purpose was to encourage, like Tony's sermon, to encourage greater participation in the church activities. And we need candidates for the board. Could it be you? We need teachers for the RE program. Could it be you? And so on. And it turns out there's an old Cole Porter song titled, "Could It Be You?" And because she knew about my musical comedy inclinations, she asked if I would prepare it for that service. Well, pretty cool. I get to dust off an old Porter tune that I hadn't known before. So, with great excitement, I tracked down the song at the library and started to work on it. But it wasn't too long before I realized this was not top drawer Cole Porter. Not an unjustly ignored, obscure gem. There's a reason why it's obscure. So I won't bore you with the nitty-gritty details. Let's just say that I didn't find it delightful or delicious or delovely. Now, that's a problem because I can't perform material that I don't believe in, that I'm not capable of putting over a song that I'm not wild about. On the other hand, how do I dare question our minister's musical taste? That's a third rail you don't want to touch. Well, I was having nightmares about this conflict, but I decided I had to face the matter head on. So, with much embarrassment, I spoke to Joan honestly that I just couldn't relate to this song at all. And I pleaded to be taken off this particular assignment. Well, and this is a situation I'd never encountered before. Well, she was very understanding, and she graciously gave me an exit ramp from this dilemma. Another piece was found for that spot, and life went on. But as the late Paul Harvey used to say, now for the rest of the story. A few months ago, I was organizing my collection of songs at home when I came across the forlorn "Could It Be You?" And with a horrified shudder, I muttered, "That's one I'll never do." And shortly thereafter, the song strangely appeared on my YouTube feed. And I listened to one, and then another, and yet another recording of the tune, and I actually started grooving to the blasted thing. Had I made too hasty a condemnation of this harmless ditty? Had Joan heard something of value here that eluded me? Well, Joan, I'm sorry I was such a show tune snob regarding "Could It Be You" and didn't give it a fair shake. So, as a mea culpa and a case of better late than never, here it is. And I hope it's worth the wait. Could it be you, the one I'm fated for? Could it be you, the love I've waited for? For lo, since you came along and kindled a song in my heart, why bother pretending the song is unending? Are you the dream I've always dreamed about? Are we the team I'm on the beam about? Could be are far too divine to come true. Or could it be really you? Could it be you, the one I'm fated for? Could it be you, the love I've waited for? For lo, since you came along and kindled a song in my heart, why bother pretending the song is unending? Are you the dream I always dream about? Are we the team I'm on the beam about? Could be these reveries of mine are far too divine to come true. Or could it be really you? Or could it be really? Could it be you?
Any song delicious, delightful, and lovely. Thank you so much, Michael. Our first speaker is actually Julie Van Wart. Now, Julie is very shy and sheepish, so she's going to need a lot of encouragement. But she's been enthusiastically supporting UUCB since and signed the book in 1986. For the last few years, her primary commitment has been to coordinating the Covenant Group Ministry and the Fun and Fellowship auction. She has also participated in the volunteer effort with over 80 of you to create a home through the Home Again project for Rafi Uller, his wife, and 6 children, who miraculously made their way here from Afghanistan. It is with gratitude that Julie Van Wart served on the 2014-2015 Ministerial Search Committee that brought Joan to UUCB. And it is that experience that she's going to be reflecting about with a few words. So thank you, Julie. Oh, she's also short.
Yeah. So I'll do my best up here. So the calling of a new minister isn't something that just happens. In 2013, after 3 years of a productive interim minister, we were ready to welcome a settled minister who would bring new energy and a new vision to UUCB. But despite the tireless work of the first Ministerial Search Committee, Doug Sherman, Christina Church, John Marone, Ken Manley, Kathleen McGriff-Powers, Martha Malkowitz, and Tracy Kastman, there was disappointment and frustration that, at the end, no match was possible. We now know that it just wasn't meant to be. Courageously, that search committee did not settle for a settled minister, but rather paved the way for where we are today. Together, we then endured a 4th year of interim ministry, and a terrible year that was. But it helped our community see even more clearly the minister we needed and wanted, the minister we yearned for. Standing on the shoulders of that first committee, the second committee, Steve Wixon, Richard Leimbach, Gigi Halliwell, Dave Batt, Martha Malkowitz, Rita Capizzi, and me spent 8 months carrying on the search. We dedicated ourselves to countless hours of meetings, reading, writing, and rewriting, and traveled hundreds of miles, always with the vision of the moment when we could announce to you that we had chosen a candidate who we hoped on May 3rd, 2015, you would call as our settled minister. And so you did. And her name, the Reverend Joan Montagnes. Joan's references described her as passionate, a critical thinker, spirited, spontaneous, collaborative, direct, a gift, a minister's minister. Her worship services were described as creative, inspiring, and thought-provoking, with a touch of drama. In her ministerial record, Joan wrote, "I am called to dedicate my heart and mind to the life of a congregation, the hopes, fears, dreams, and passions of its members, the excellence of its worship, and the health of its governance and programming. I hope to loyally serve a congregation that seeks ever-deepening meaning, cares intentionally for its members, and wishes to share the good news of Unitarian Universalism with the wider community. I am also interested in a super fun ministry shared with great congregational leaders. At last, the perfect fit. We chose Joan, she chose us, and we made history. Joan became our first woman minister. On behalf of our two committees, we thank you for entrusting us with that sacred work. And soon, after 1 year of interim ministry, a new search committee will be formed who will also need our love and support. Will you accept the privilege to serve on that committee? Joan was worth the wait. She was the best good fit to serve this beloved community. She was the minister we yearn for. Choosing Joan and her choosing us has been life-changing for Joan, for this UUCB community, and for many of us personally. And for that, we are grateful. Blessed be.
Julie, that was awesome. Thank you for sharing your words and your emotions. So while Joan was doing candidating week, she met with various church groups, including the Board of Trustees, and I was a member of the board at that time. And in my 3 years of being on the board, Joan would be my third minister. Fun times, right? On Joan's first night in Buffalo, the board took her out to dinner, and I sat directly across from Joan, and I wasn't having any BS. She was going to be my third minister, and by golly, she darn well better be a good one. So I stared her down, and I asked, "Do you like people?" Her eyes went wide in that Joan-like way, and she said, "Yes." And then she said, "You must have gone through some painful experiences in the past few years." Now, I've probably interviewed thousands of job applicants in my career, and the good ones always have the moment. And this was the moment. That acknowledgement of pain and the understanding of emotions is exactly what made Joan the right choice to be our minister. And she's lived that statement ever since. And thank you, Joan, for understanding our needs and taking such good care of us. And now let us hear from our current board president, Bobby Withrow. Bobby became a member in 2019 and is currently the president of the Board of Trustees. Bobby, you can be here or there.
You know, it was actually tough for me to figure out what I was going to say today. I've been kind of only working on it this morning. I'm not usually one to be at a loss for words. Then it hit me. I want to talk about what Joan has done for me spiritually. And for me, this was to help me to live out what I'll call my church purpose. Now, my husband and I moved to Buffalo in 2019. He got a job teaching at Damon, and one of the first things I wanted to do was find another UU church. I was a member of one in Cleveland. And I was trying to figure out what one. Okay, we lived in Williamsville, so Amherst would make more sense because it was so close, but then I saw the website for this church, and I saw the music program, and that's what drew me in, because I wanted to be able to sing in the choir. So I signed the membership book that fall, telling myself that I wanted to take from being, let's just say it was a little overly involved. Let me tell you, that didn't last long, obviously. So apparently my husband, Kurt, didn't believe me when I said I didn't want to get involved in church stuff and I was going to take a break. Guess he knows me better than I do. For me, my personal ministry to the church has always been more organizational and managerial type of things. I'm not the marching or protesting type. You've heard me talk about that before. I'm not comfortable doing that kind of work. I'd much rather be behind the scenes, organizing this, setting up that, emailing about this, coordinating, that kind of stuff. But I still needed a break. I was tired. Between moving and an exhausting couple of years in my old church with doing the managerial and organizational type things, I was just worn out spiritually. I needed that kind of break. Now, during COVID, I started putting the lyrics and other things into the chat, if you guys remember all of that. And this was just me trying to be helpful. I probably should not have done that, because little did I know that Joan had some designs for me based upon that. Yeah, and now she's kind of smirking and grinning because she knows it's true. So she knew of my past life, church life, and level of involvement at West Shore. And I lost my spot, I'm sorry. And I also believe she knew from the very beginning that I was going to end up getting more involved. Because I can't stay away. I'm like the good version of a bad penny. To make a long story short, Joan knew what I needed to do and what I actually needed spiritually. And I believe this is her strength, connecting people with tasks, suggesting them for positions and work, and introducing them to other people, allowing people to grow in their faith and serving needs greater and higher than their own. She started me down a path from being just a, steward of the online chat, just kind of lurking there, to worship associate, to board member, and now finally to board president. This is my purpose in this church, to serve in whatever way I can so the rest of you can also grow and serve. So, Reverend Joan Montagnes, I want to thank you for getting me involved again, even if it is a little too much at times, and connecting me and reconnecting me with my purpose. It takes a lot of work, as you know, but it's worth it. I will continue to serve because of you. This is my vow, and I will honor it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. And also on the board is Thea Hassan. And Thea has been a member with the church for 4 years and is currently serving as the treasurer on the board of trustees. She's also an apprentice cremations caretaker, and that's a possible conversation piece at coffee hour, just saying. Come on, Thea, thank you.
I'm not short, but I have my computer, so I want to get this stool. This is Harriet. She's going to help me out. I still am afraid of public speaking, and I also felt like I needed a prop. So say hello to Harriet from Joan's desk. Okay. Once upon a time, in a far-away land, there was a blustering cold but very beautiful town called Buffalo. And in this town, on the corner of West Ferry and Elmwood, on land originally belonging to the Haudenosaunee tribe, sat a charming stone church with awe-inspiring stained glass windows and magnificent oak beam trusses. And in the church, there were bats in the belfry, and cremations in the garden, and in the pews sat beautiful people. Some of the people were happy, some were sad, some were looking for a place to bring their children to learn, and others were hoping to find footing on their own spiritual path. Some of the people were grieving, and some were celebrating. Some sang loudly from the pews, while others just tried to blend in. Some people were dragged here by family and friends, while other people had stepped in the doors willingly. Some people came late and sat in the back and left right when the service was over, and others arrived early and sat in the front and mingled with their fellow congregants. Some people had been coming to this church for their whole lives, and some people only for a few weeks or a few years. And on one unusual day, when the wind was blowing in from the north, a new minister, a Canadian, dressed in linen and artisan jewelry, arrived at the church's doorsteps. And she was something no minister had ever been here before, a woman. Luckily, the new minister, Reverend Joan, had a magical gift to help her on this quest. She was a magical storyteller. Anything she read, from bylaws to biblical passages, poems to policy docs, tall tales and children's books to the Torah, her lively narration and animation and her character voices brought the written word to life. On Sunday during her services, she'd call the children forward first, and with her props and her lavalier mic, she'd act out her storybook tale, usually with a strong moral lesson, and even though the story was for kids, all the adults paid attention to. And later, when it was the adults' turn to hear the story they needed to hear in order to live better and more true lives, she'd stand at her podium and deliver her sermons with an enthusiasm and liveliness unmatched in all the land. She was also very, very funny, and she made the people laugh from their bellies in a way they had never laughed at church before. But she was sharp too, and she called the congregants to attention, and she asked them to do more than just sit in the pews. She asked them to act on their values, and she always reminded them that they were never alone. And her storytelling was so magical that when new congregants wandered in, they were captivated by her gift. Some weren't sure how to feel about being in a church or knew exactly what Unitarian Universalism was, but they knew Reverend Joan's words resonated in their heads and their hearts and their souls, and inspired them to be better, more reflective, more open-hearted people. And even though they started out as one of the back of the church people, soon they grew brave enough to sit in the middle pews. And some even attended extracurricular events at the congregation. And the church began to feel like a home, and it was all because Reverend Joan kept inviting them in and asking them to get more and more involved. When Reverend Joan wasn't using her magical gift to inspire the congregants, she got into good trouble outside the church. She marched in rallies, she built friendships with other faith organizations, she helped connect the church with other groups doing good work, and she inspired the congregants to donate their time and money to these groups. She bought staples, and she helped keep the church's affairs in order, and she invited inspiring guests into the church to make sure the congregants knew what was going on in their larger community and heard from diverse voices. And she modeled how you can be in conflict while still staying in community, that even when we disagree on things, we can still love each other. Then one day, in March 2020, a terrible curse fell on the town and the entire world, a plague, a modern-day pandemic that shut down the entire world. And the people were very frightened, and they desperately needed something to hold on to and to make the world seem kind of normal again. So the magical Reverend Joan said, "We'll do it on Zoom." And she and her magical helpers brought her magical gift to the computer so the people stuck in their homes with no contact to the outside world could still be reminded of their community and their faith and that good things still existed. And the people needed this so much that they'd plan their sad, homebound weeks around the live Sunday church service. And people who never stepped foot in this church tuned in too. And when the church stayed closed, but the people could kind of meet again, they'd have small Sunday morning church parties where they would sit in small groups outside on their patios to watch Reverend Joan tell her stories. And Reverend Joan led the congregation through the sadness of the pandemic and into the light of opening the church doors to gather in person once again. And through it all, the church remained strong, and they continued to love each other because Reverend Joan helped hold them together. Then one sad day, the Reverend Joan felt the wind blowing again, and she knew it was her time to leave. Some people were sad and hurt and maybe felt a little abandoned, especially the new congregants who only knew this church as the home of the magical storyteller. But they understood that sometimes the wind changes and life shifts, and they watched as the magical Reverend Joan planned her departure. And as they watched, they learned that goodbyes can be as joy-filled as hellos, and that they are just as important. And so when one of the new congregants was asked to speak as the church said farewell, even though she doesn't really like to say goodbye, she wrote a short story to share in the spirit of Reverend Joan, even in her linen, in hopes that the magical minister would understand how much her service meant to her and to the congregation. And in both the story and in real life, she wished Joan the very best, and she thanks her sincerely for the blessing of her service. Thank you.
Thank you, Thea. Next, I'd like to introduce Steve Wixon. Steve Wixon is a longtime friend and member of the church, and he's been involved in more ways than I can count and has been a guide and mentor to many of us. And Steve would like to share a few words. You can go, if you want to use the... Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
I'm Steve Wixon, as many as you know. I have had the privilege of getting to know and work with Reverend Joan in a number of capacities. As Julie had said, I was on the search committee. I was a former worship associate, as well as a long-term member of the Justice Ministry team. I'd like to highlight the work of the Justice Ministry team and Joan's impact on us. The team has evolved over the years, but the focus has always been on supporting local 501c3 nonprofit organizations who align with our mission to make our community a better place. This is the Share the Plate program, where we identify a worthy organization to support each month, just as we heard this morning. An emphasis of the team has also been to create opportunities to impact those organizations, not only with our financial support, but with further involvement with each monthly organization. Joan has been a strong presence of consistently reminding us of our mission and goals as a social justice presence in the community. She has given us creative ideas and suggestions, but seldom specific direction. We talked about COVID. One of Joan's suggestions was a sock drive. We weren't meeting, but the idea was that we would be available in the atrium after at noon or 1 after a couple Sundays, and it was a great success, and those are that's the type of suggestions we fortunately received. In other activities, we've written postcards in support of various organizations like Restorative Justice Coalition. We've eaten lunch at the Big Table on the West Side, toured the African American Heritage Corridor, and visited Providence Farm Collective. We've also shown up in our yellow UUCB advocacy vest. And we've done that to numerous gatherings and protests to let the community know where we as a church community stood. Joan created and distributed these vests. She may actually have some in her office she'd like to get rid of, or joyfully distribute. Joan, as you leave after 8 productive years of both the Justice Ministry team and the congregation as a whole, I have most appreciated your support and encouragement in various projects along the way. Your willingness to show your vulnerability and to share your mistakes. I believe it has allowed us to be more vulnerable and to fear our own mistakes less. Your tenderness towards this congregation has helped move us towards the path. In closing, remember you're blessed. You are a blessing. Most of all, remember you are not alone. You are never alone. In retirement, you get to hang out with Martin even more. Blessed be, and thanks.
I think there might be a run on those sexy vests in Joan's office. I saw Charlene Montgomery eyeing it up. So our next speaker is Ginny Vaughn, and Lynn Mancuso has graciously offered to read Ginny's statements. Ginny has been an official member for about 12 years, but even before that, she was coming to Sunday services and Christmas Eve services. Ginny, if you don't know, facilitates UAIM, the Universal Access and Inclusion Ministry team, and she's also highly active in the pastoral care and support team. Thank you, Lynn.
Good afternoon. I'm reading for Ginny. She's the facilitator of the Universal Access and Inclusion team. Our membership includes Lynn Mancuso, Sophia Roberts, Sue Mandolci, and Steve Wixon. Former members are Tony Keller and Janie Kristuba. There are several examples of the great support that Reverend Joan has offered. First, when we invited Galen Lee, she was a Tiny Desk winner, NPR. She's a singer who happens to use a wheelchair. Reverend Joan was more than willing to have us place ramping up to the chancel so Galen could lead us in worship. The ramp was donated by Ed Harris after he no longer needed it, and now resides in the Undercroft, hopefully to be used on another occasion. A second example of the support that Reverend Joan has offered is our efforts to create accessible seating in the sanctuary. Everyone was not in agreement, but there was concern that shortening and rearranging the pews might diminish the beauty of this sanctuary. Reverend Joan was a positive force and understood that to be a welcome congregation meant creating a space for all people to feel comfortable in. Joan, you have always supported our service ideas and projects, such as our current project of bringing together disabled members of the LGBTQA+ community with GLIS community for an afternoon of games. You often thank UAIM for our work, but we so appreciate your awareness of issues related to folks with disabilities and your willingness to support those issues in large and small ways. Thank you, Reverend Joan. You will be missed, and we wish you well.
Thank you, Ginny and Lynn. And if you've ever tried to come on up here into the pulpit, it is a little bit difficult to do with the stone steps and no railings and everything. So thank you for all your work that you've done to help us with other areas of our church too. Our next speaker is Kathleen Ludwig. Now, I met Kathleen Ludwig many years ago when I attended a UUCB Information Center session that she hosted at her house, and she probably doesn't remember this. But that was back when Joel was our minister. And Kathleen has been an inspiring voice in the church, championing the return of the bell ringing, reminding us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, and to bless and not to curse. So today, Kathleen is going to share a few words for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Is this the right volume? Is this the right volume? I can't hear. Is it? Okay. Where's Reverend Joan? I want to thank you, Reverend Joan, for the times you sang to us as part of your Sunday morning message. First of all, I will clearly state the obvious. You have a lovely singing voice. I'm not an expert, but I know lovely when I hear it. One morning, you sang, "Take my hand, precious Lord." We heard the composer's family story of loss, grief, and faith, and I remember your heartfelt singing, and it was precious, a memory. Several years ago, on Pride Sunday, you sang two songs, Oklahoma and Oh, What a Beautiful Morning. Both songs have great lyrics, but one of my favorites is "The sounds of the earth are like music." Several weeks later, I was in rehab after a fall and broken hip. I was worrying about my future when I remembered your singing those songs. Trying to recall the lyrics without any digital support and singing those songs to myself pushed aside those worries for hours at a time. Your excellent and exuberant singing led to my learning a coping mechanism that still works. 2 more falls and 1 blizzard later, I am still here and filled with gratitude for your help. The songs you sang during the Story for All Ages were always clever, fun, and joyful. Several weeks ago, as we heard you sang Anne Murray's Songbird, we all agreed you sang it beautifully. That song is filled with your family memories, and now that song will be filled with us, memories of you. You have been generous in sharing your time and talent with us, and we are very, very grateful.
Thank you, Kathleen. Our last speaker today is Fran Manley. Fran Manley joined this church in about 1987, and a year later was hired as the Director of Religious Education, where she served for 7 years while she was studying for the ministry. And then she spent 12 years as minister of the UU churches in Niagara Falls and Hamburg before retiring and returning here as a member. She is a founding member of the Worship Associates ministry team and sings in the choir.
I'm going to circle back a little bit here to Joan's first sermon here as a candidate for our settled ministry. I was in the choir that day, sitting up in the loft. I don't remember what the choir sang. I don't remember what Joan preached about. What I do remember was that I was in tears as she preached, and so were a number of other choir members. Need I say those were tears of joy? Some of us wept because we were about, as you've heard again and again this morning, we were about to call our first woman as a settled minister of this congregation, something we had been waiting for, some of us, for a long, long time. But even more, it was because we were about to call this woman. We were getting our first glimpse of her superpowers, and we were moved beyond words. What superpowers? What we could see that day was how she preached in a way that touched our hearts and fed our souls even as it challenged our minds. Perhaps we could also sense, even in that first sermon, that she would love our church and love us, and she would let us love her in return, and that love might then become the heart of all we did together. As time went on, we would see other superpowers. You've heard about some of them this morning. The ability to help people find the place and the work in the church where their deep passion met the church's and sometimes the world's deep need. The ability to reach out into the community and make connections. The ability to lead us through the dark days of the pandemic. All this and so much more, so much more. And now, after 8 fine years, wonderful years, the time has come, as it always does come, when we must say farewell. As both Joan and our church move on to whatever comes next. We will weep again, no doubt, quite possibly today. And they will be tears of sadness. But they will also be tears of joy for the memory of 8 wonderful years. Farewell then, Joan. Your ministry has been a blessing to the church and to each one of us. Whatever comes next for you, you will continue to be a blessing to those around you. We will miss you a lot, and we wish you well.
Thanks in large part to Reverend Rosemary Joan Montagnes, and you know that if you went to Intro to UU class. Love in this congregation abounds. So many inspiring stories, so many lives touched, so many hearts have been changed. And now the farewell committee would like to present Joan with some items. Who from the farewell committee will be representing? Bridget, thank you. Reverend Joan, if you could come on forward.
Hi, guys. I don't have any prepared remarks. I was just going to hand things to Joan. But we worked hard, Lucy Sloan, led by Lucy Sloan, to organize the food, the speeches. Look at Joan. Isn't she so cute? But we do have a few things. A book was created, a photo book for you, Joan, to keep us in your hearts. This is for you. We also have a bunch of gifts from numerous committees, and a box created just for you by Mario Nunez. And everyone has come together and donated lots of goodies for you, and that's in this bag, dear. That's for you. Thank you. We also have the wonderful card Peter Sloan has created. This is for you, Joan, and it's been signed. It's so gorgeous. Yay!
Joan.
Okay, and did we have one? What was the other thing? Oh, good.
This is no surprise because you've heard it announced every Sunday morning recently, but this is a book in which people have been invited to write little messages to you. And I'm going to hand it to you, and you're going to hand it back to me because we want to have it available while you're having lunch, because I think there are probably a number of you who would like to have written it and haven't had the chance yet. And the same thing will be true of the card. So you'll still have a chance to write in those if you would like to, and then we will give them to Joan toward the end of this. But you can hold it.
I'll hold it. I will hold it and go to the. I'm going to go up here. Is now the moment?
Now I think that's.
I took the box. I took the bag. Should I open those now?
I think you should look at the box. It was designed by Mario.
Oh, the box is in the bag? Sorry, this is unscripted.
It's wrapped. It's in the box. It's in there, but it's wrapped up.
I will open things later. How's that? Because I think we're hungry. I wanted to come up here because I didn't think I was going to get a chance to again. I came in here to stow something behind the rare dose because that's where we put everything, right? And it was the church's menorah, and it needed to leave my office and go there. And I put it in there, and I looked at the sanctuary. I said, "I'll never speak from that pulpit again," and I am. Mostly, what I want to say is that all those gorgeous stories, and thank you all for sharing those. I can't even tell you. This is like going to your own memorial service, but better. Nothing mentioned in those stories did I do on my own. Everything I did with a cast of astonishing people, comrades in ministry, partners in ministry. We did it together. This is how wonderful you are. You are a great congregation. It has been a joy, a privilege, an honor to serve you. I love you. I will always love you. And you have blessed me. You have blessed me. And you bless everyone you touch. Remember, you are a blessing. Remember that you are blessed, and above all else, no matter what you do, above all else, remember you're not alone. You're never alone. I love you.
Michael, would you please come sing us home?
I had the privilege way back when we were saying goodbye to Joel Miller, our previous settled minister, and I sang a little version of a reading that's in our hymnal, number 685, the words of T.S. Eliot, and one of the verses reads, "What we call a beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from." Wonderful, wonderful words of Eliot, but I don't know. I understand it rationally, I understand it from the head, but for me it doesn't quite reach the heart. So I would like to refer to another wonderful poet, namely our friend Cole Porter. because he wrote one of the great goodbye songs of all time. And I've given a little tweak to the opening verse, but boy, this is one that really is a cry from the heart. And I say, get your handkerchiefs out now because you're going to need it. Here we are, from the top shelf of Cole Porter. These 8 years, our love has grown deeply, so much more than at the start. Ties that we loathe to sever, why can't we keep them together, never to part? Every time we say goodbye, I die a little. Every time we say goodbye, I wonder why a little, why the gods above me, who must be in the know, so little of me, they allow you to go. When you're near, there's such an air of spring about it. I can hear a lark somewhere begin to sing about it. There's no love song finer, but how strange the change from major to minor. Every time we say goodbye. Change from major to minor. Every time we say goodbye, every single time we say
So much love, so much impact Joan has made in our lives, and we are blessed to have called her our minister, and I'm sure we all wish her well in the future. It is, you can't have another career after this, I keep telling you that. I mean, biologist, minister, there's something more. Lunch will be ready in about 15 minutes, so please take your time, mingle, share stories, and talk to each other. And that's a wrap, people.